So let me, first of all, thank François and the organizers for this beautiful workshop. I'm really, really excited and glad to be here. This is a work in progress, and your feedback will be very, very welcome. Let me start with this way of putting things. So the philosophical literature on indexicals can be seen as pivoting around and reflecting the significance of a number of examples, which usually go by the name of Perry cases. Sorry about that. I think it's not controversial that we can see or sort out these cases into at least these four types: the personal, the locative, the demonstrative, and the temporal, and as involving what I call epiphanies following Scott Soames and others. So the personal epiphanies are rather well known in the literature, and they are typically considered to be useful in the elucidation of the first-person concept. Roughly, these are cases in which, for any singular term T and predicate F, the subject actually understands. The subject, take it to be informative that a statement of the form I am F is co-referential with a statement of the form T is F. Right? So I'd like to highlight the sort of structural similarity with these other cases, starting with the locative case. And locative epiphanies are perhaps somewhat less discussed in the literature, but these are cases in which, for any singular term T and predicate F, the subject understands. The subject takes it to be informative that the statement of the form here is F is co-referential with the statement of the form T is F. And the same would happen also for the demonstrative case, which is typically associated with perception, the perceptually based uses of singular terms. And here the idea is that, again, for this class of terms, the subject would take it to be informative that statement of the form that is F is co-referential with a statement of the form T is F. Finally, we have the temporal case, where we would have something like this. Cases in which now we have singular terms referring to times, and it's informative for a subject that understands the terms involved that a statement of the form now is F is co-referential with a statement of the form T is F. Well, epiphanies, I'm sure David would disagree, but they are traditionally taken to show that different modes of presentation are needed to analyze these cases, be them or not part of the content considered to be the object of the attitudes or the thought in Frege's terminology. So you can have like Berrien or non-Fregean articulations of these modes of presentation. And this interpretation, what the subject learns in an epiphanous way in these cases, is that different modes of presentation associated with or being part of the content are modes of representation of the same thing in the world, the same object in the world. These epiphanies are all pair cases, broadly construed. Raise important questions. Here are some of the questions that I think they. Well, I mean, we could agree that they raise. Perhaps there's also the question of whether these pair cases are just Frege cases. For instance, so I don't mean to suggest that these are all the questions that we can ask, but at least these three questions. One question is what is exactly the relation between the linguistic terms involved and the kind of thought thereby expressed? And are there distinctive features of each kind of epiphany? Should we take into account specific features that are distinctive of each case of this kind of epiphany? And then are some epiphanies more basic or essential than others? And if so, which ones? So for the purposes of this talk, I'm only going to focus on 1 and 2, and in particular, I'm going to focus on the temporal case. I'm not going to say anything about 3, although I like to know that there are, although there is perhaps a dominant position that would say, or would think that personal epiphanies are more fundamental, there is also room for other positions. I think Prosser, maybe Mateus, Prosser better than I am, but perhaps Prosser would be someone who would think that locative epiphanies are more fundamental, and for instance, people like Daniel Morgan would think that the temporal ones are more fundamental. But anyway, I'm not going to say anything else about that, unless you want to raise this in the Q&A. So this is the plan that I'm going to follow. First, I'm going to talk about deep epiphanies. I think there are particular kinds of epiphanies that are particularly revealing. Then I'm going to move to the temporal case and say why there is at least one particular feature that seems to be distinctive of that case. Then I'm going to present the Reverse van Winkle, which is a variation of the classical Pierre van Winkle case that Tadeusz taught us about yesterday. And then I'm going to basically put forward these 2 claims, that indexical thought is not merely a linguistic phenomenon, and that indexical thought requires composite modes of presentation, which is a notion that Recanati has introduced in at least one recent paper, but it also probably has to be put in the context of other work he's developing. 2 methodological notes. By indexical thought, I want to mean neutrally, thought expressible with indexical expressions, such as the ones used to describe the epiphanies. And by epiphany, I refer to a situation that would make an epiphany possible without necessarily making explicit, the actual realization involved in the knowledge or awareness of the co-referentiality of the terms involved. Okay, the epiphanies. One might wonder whether something like deep epiphanies are possible. These will be cases in which even when we fix a particular indexical plus the referent, and then therefore a context, it is still possible that subjects rely on different modes of presentation, so that it makes sense to ask whether those modes of presentation are actually modes of presentation of the same thing, the same referent. And I think we can, by analogy with the more traditional cases, see 4 instances of this kind of epiphanies. The personal case will be a case in which we use the same expression, in particular the first person pronoun, and it is still, so, and this first person pronoun refers to the same subject in the same context, and it might still be informative for a subject that understands the terms involved, that a statement of the form I am F is co-referential with a statement of the form I am F, right? So I'm not going to articulate this possibility. Francois yesterday told us about a case. That's the kind of case that I actually had in mind. Myself, slightly different. So you might have like someone hearing or seeing someone in a video saying I am F, without the subject realizing that person he or she is hearing is actually herself. So I think there is room for deep epiphanies also for the first person, for the personal deep epiphanies. Also cases of thought insertion where the inserted thought involves the first person pronoun. I think that those will also be candidates for cases of deep epiphanies, personal deep epiphanies. We may also consider this kind of epiphany for locative indexicals. So these would be cases in which it is potentially informative that a statement of the form here is F is co-referential with the statement of the form here is F when here refers to the same place and in the same context. Again, I think some a case reflecting on cases in which one hears someone uttering one of these sentences on a TV, for instance, would actually be co-referring to something to a place that a subject is actually referring to with the same expression, with the same sentence. So, and also Lewis's two gods, I think there might also be a case. It might also be a case in which you could, or variation of it could be used to show that locative deep epiphanies are possible. Demonstrative epiphanies, there be cases in which subjects take it to be informative that a statement of the form that is F is co-referential with a statement of the form that is F. So we might think that in the literature already we find deep epiphanies in this sense for the demonstrative case. So I'm thinking of Perry's ship case, where someone sees the bow and the stern of the same ship and utters that ship. But there are also other cases. I'm not sure if I have time to go into them, but I mean very, very briefly, cases which we might call double vision cases, in which more than one perspective on a particular object are involved. Here, for instance, Recanati considers the possibility that so I'm not going to go through the quote, because otherwise it'd be too long. The possibility that we have the straight perceptual contact with an object, but also a mirror contact with the same object. So you might have like two different perspectives involved in perception of a given object. for which it makes, and in this kind of a scenario, it would make sense to wonder whether a statement of the form that is F is co-referential with a statement of the form that is F. And let me also mention very briefly this. There's a very similar case. It's just I mentioned this just as an out of because I find it quite revealing, but it's just an anecdote. Although I think something to be explored. So Jacob Mortimer in Oxford is studying Indian Buddhist philosophy, and he has discovered this. There is this. He told me about this philosopher, Dhammakirti, who has this example of someone seeing two moons because of some impairment in the vision, and so this case reminds me so much of Recanati mirror case, because you have a subject who has a perceptual acquaintance with an object, but through what seems to be, arguably, are two perspectives. Anyways, so there seems to be easy to articulate the possibility of in a way to articulate the possibility of deep epiphanies for demonstratives. But here I'd like to focus on temporal deep epiphanies, so cases where it is possible for a subject who understands the terms involved that a statement of the form now is F is co-referential with a statement of the form now is F. So initially you might think this is a bit not so easy to articulate this particular possibility, but to which I will return in a moment. Let me advance this idea first. If deep epiphanies are really possible, then it would seem that we must acknowledge a certain structure in modes of presentation generally. So that's at least made plausible, I think, by the consideration of these deep epiphanies. So modes of presentation, if deep epiphanies are possible, modes of presentation will be possibly constituted by different perspectives of constituent modes of presentation in turn. So you'll see like certain structure in the modes of presentation that we will usually associate with indexical expressions, like the ones I've been discussing. Now, are there genuine examples that support the postulation of deep epiphanies in the temporal case? And that's what I want to address here. With now, I think, is not so easy. So I'm going to focus on a today example. So an example based on uses of the day-based indexical today. Here seems that there is a difficulty, which is that it seems rather tricky to think of the possibility that users of day-based indexicals actually refer to the same thing and then make an epiphany possible. Even a normal, simple epiphany, right? And this is something that Recanati, commenting on Evans's remarks, points out in this passage. He claims, there is no way in which a subject can think of a single day both as today and as yesterday at the same time. So on D1, you think of D1 as today, and on the following day, D2, you think of it as yesterday. But there is no time at which you can think of that day both as today and as yesterday. So there is no way in which we can check whether a rational subject thinking of a single day D both as today and as yesterday at the same time could or could not hold conflicting attitudes towards the thought expressed by means of today, and that expressed by means of yesterday. So the very question on which epiphanies are based, question about whether different modes of presentation are presentation of the same thing, doesn't seem like to arise in these cases when you compare today and yesterday, right? So here a particularly relevant case is the Rip van Winkle story, by Washington Irving. This is a story of a man who falls asleep in the mountain and sleeps for 2 decades while the American Revolution is happening. And then the tale tells you about all the changes that have occurred and how Rip van Winkle finds out about everything. This case has been attracted considerable attention in the philosophy of language, philosophy of mind literature, at least since Kaplan brief remarks on the case. So the original case is a case in which Rip van Winkle goes to the mountain, and before encountering some strange dwarves that make him drink some strange liquors, utters, today is fine. And then he falls asleep, sleeps for 20 years, and after this, a time t prime, he utters, yesterday was fine. And now, here the question, one question is did he actually retain his original thought, or does this use of yesterday at time t prime actually refer? So those are questions you can raise about that case. But let me. So I'm not going to say anything about that. What I want to focus is on a variation of this case, which, I mean, it's I haven't seen this sort of variation, and it strikes me as, you know, very simple variation of the case that is also like interesting, and I want to reflect on it today. So here, instead of Rip van Winkle falling asleep and wrongly thinking that just one day has passed, what happens is that he only falls asleep for a few minutes. But because he's, you know, consumed these very strange, magical sort of spirited drinks, he thinks that a lot of time has passed, like maybe weeks, months, or years, right? And now the exercise is to think that Rip van Winkle utters today is fine, both before falling asleep and after falling asleep. Okay. So here, these are different stages from the original case, and at time t, Rip van Winkle utters today is fine. It sleeps for 5 minutes, and at time t prime, if in several days or months, perhaps years have passed, and utters today is fine. Right, so I think, so one primary thing about this, and this is not the way that I'm going to, this is not the version I'm relying on here, but I think that it seems to me quite clear that reflection on this case would show the possibility that there is an epiphany, temporal epiphany involving today and yesterday terms, right? So, so for instance, let's suppose that he's not, Rip van Winkle is not sure about what the relation is between the day at stage 2 in the example, and someone just tells him that today there would actually sorry. Let's suppose that a version in which just 1 day passes between the original today utterance at stage 1 and the second utterance, and then it would seem to be informative in that sort of case that there is these two expressions, today is fine and yesterday was fine, are co-referential. So I think, I mean, this is very poorly made explicit, but I think that the point is rather clear, that you can have like different, today and yesterday, an epiphany where involving today and yesterday, where they actually refer to the same day. Yeah, 10 minutes, right? Okay.
No. Until we have until 11:30. So if you want to speak 10 minutes more, we still have 20 minutes to discuss.
It's 26 minutes gone, according to my. Sorry?
We were supposed to have 35 minutes.
Oh, 35 minutes. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Okay. Great. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So let me speed up a bit. Yeah. So, but what's more important about this case is I think it is a deep epiphany for the temporal day-based indexical today. That is to say, it's a case in which a subject takes it to be informative. It can. Subject actually, it is potentially informative for a subject that a statement of the form today is F is co-referential with a statement of the form today is F, because obviously Rip van Winkle at stage 2 we don't know that his previous utterance of today is fine at stage 1 refers to the same day, right? If we accept something like the Evans Intuitive Criterion of Difference, I think this can be used to show that at least two understandings of the relation between indexicality and thought are wrong-headed. According to the linguistic view, indexicality is a property of linguistic terms only, and these terms express thoughts relative to a particular context in which linguistic terms are uttered. I think David yesterday came close to endorse something like the linguistic view. If this were correct, sameness of relevant context of utterance and indexical expression and reference should guarantee sameness of thought, but that doesn't seem at least obvious, and it is in fact not correct if we endorse something like Evans' Intuitive Criterion of Difference. So here the assumption, there's this assumption that a relevant context here is a day. So we keep the day is fixed, and that's the kind of context that is relevant for a day-based indexical like today. So you might want to dispute that assumption. The case then shows that the same day-based indexical today and the same relevant context refer to the same day may involve conflicting rational attitudes and hence arguably or standardly different thoughts. Well, you might object that Rip van Winkle, or the Reverse van Winkle, doesn't actually remember the first today thought at T prime. So it is actually not possible for this subject to have, like, you know, the two utterances of today is fine in mind to raise the to make this case possible. And this is something that Recanati also acknowledges. One doesn't require that that is the case, that Rip van Winkle actually remembers that day. It only requires that he doesn't change his mind in the process with respect to the thought he expressed at T, right, at the first stage, right? So then you might think that this case could be taken to illustrate that there is a very tight connection between indexicality and thought. But then it is not very clear how this idea could be articulated, taking into account these cases, because these cases, sometimes, in this case, you'd have the same sort of context and indexical conditions, but it's still arguably different thoughts. And there is also the case, made familiar by the literature on cognitive dynamics, that you have difference in context and difference in the indexically specified conditions, indexical conditions, and still sameness of thought, right? So there seems to be a mismatch. In this particular case, in the case of the deep epiphany, temporal deep epiphany, you'd have, yes, as I just said, different, same indexical conditions for today is F, and what you then might think suggests that involves expression of the same thought, assuming that the subject didn't change his mind, and whether or not the subject keeps track of time. And still, it seems to be possible to have conflicting attitudes towards thoughts expressed with today is F at different times on the same day. Right. So one idea here would be to appeal to composite modes of presentation. According to Recanati, composite mode of presentation is a mode of presentation that, although is static, deployed at a given time in thinking of the object, it rests on distinct simultaneous relations to the object and on distinct ways of gaining information, distinct information channels based on these relations. If we apply this sort of idea to this case, what we would have is that Rip van Winkle takes a course to two different modes of presentation of a particular day, one that is based on either memory, if you think that he actually remembers, or perhaps some other sorts of awareness, or just a retained disposition to assent to it, which he hasn't lost after falling asleep. And that's one mode of presentation, and the other one will be based on his current awareness of the day in question. So the idea is that if you don't actually hang out with magical dwarves, you would typically merge these different modes of presentations into one composite mode of presentation to think and reason about days, but that's something that Rip van Winkle can't really do because of his special magical situation. But we would actually merge this or combine this modes of presentation, and Rip van Winkle would actually combine these modes of presentation into a composite one in normal circumstances. So I should be stopping now. Okay. So let me just say that so I think there are different ways of articulating the idea of composite modes of presentation. One obvious way, rather obvious way, in this context is in terms of mental files, in terms of dynamic files, but other possibilities are also available, like thinking of composite modes of presentations as involving equivalent classes of different lower level modes of presentation, or speak of different abilities involved in thinking of a particular time, or you can think, so this is something I've developed in the past, in terms of, so provide an account in terms of reference rules. A reference rule that somehow encompasses and opens up a space of different perspectives. So there is an ulterior question, there are ulterior questions that have to do with when modes of presentation, composite modes of presentation are available, whether we should think of composite modes of presentation also in the non-indexical case, and whether this is helpful to articulate also a notion of interpersonal sharing that is made available by these composite modes of presentation. I'm very sorry not to have time to develop these points. So I have suggested that a number of deep epiphanies may be relevant in the correct account of indexical thought. I've focused on this Reverse van Winkle case. I think the case shows that linguistic and simple indexical views are not okay. And instead I have advanced very briefly the view that composite modes of presentation might be useful here with these potential ramifications of the idea that I just mentioned. Thank you very much.